The train from Boston was 7 hours late, and the man waiting on the platform was expecting a wife half her age. The letter promised a sturdy, childbearing widow of 30, but the woman who stepped down was 62, her grey hair pinned tight, her expression unreadable. She carried a single carpet bag, locked, and according to the Pinkerton report he'd receive a week later, she was traveling under a dead woman's name. This was the American frontier in 1885, where men outnumbered women 2 to 1, and mail-order brides were a desperate solution. But the system was riddled with fraud. So when rancher Eli Carter paid for a young wife to help work his land, he faced a simple, terrifying question. Was she a harmless mistake, or was her secret worth killing for? Eli Carter's ranch was dying. 2 years of drought had cracked the Nebraska earth, and the bank in Ogallala was sending notices written in red ink. At 34, he was alone in a 3-room cabin that echoed. He needed help, hard, willing help to mend fences, tend the few surviving cattle, and maybe, just maybe, salvage the homestead before the auction notice came. A wife was an economic necessity, not a romance. So he scraped together $80, a fortune in those lean months, and sent it to the Heart's Haven Matrimonial Agency of Chicago. The agency's advertisement promised vuttered, respectable women seeking opportunity. Their correspondence was a dance of careful lies. Eli wrote that he owned 300 acres, which was true, but omitted that 280 of them were dust. He said he was robust, which he was, but didn't mention the cough he'd carried since the winter pneumonia. In return, he received a letter from a widow named Clara Mills. Her script was elegant. She described herself as 30, strong, experienced in household management, and yearning for a quiet life of purpose. She enclosed a photograph, a sepia-toned image of a woman with dark hair and a steady gaze. Eli sent the train ticket west. The woman who arrived was not the woman in the photograph. Eli stood on the platform of the tiny Cunner station, the promised picture crumpled in his fist. The train belched steam and passengers descended. Then he saw her. She was older, decades older, with silver hair wound in a severe bun and a posture so upright it seemed to defy the weary platform. Her dress was a sober brown wool, out of place in the spring heat. She carried one item, a worn carpet bag with a sturdy brass lock. She looked at him, not with embarrassment, but with a calm, assessing sharpness, like a bookkeeper reviewing a ledger. "Mr. Carter, I presume," she said. Her voice was clear without a tremor. "My name is Cora. There has been an administrative error." Eli was too stunned to speak. He'd imagined awkwardness, perhaps disappointment, but not this cold, blatant substitution. The ticket had cost $12. The agency fee was non-refundable. Every instinct told him to put her back on the eastbound train, but doing so meant losing everything he'd paid and facing the ranch utterly alone again. The shame of being swindled was a hot coal in his chest. With a stiff nod, he took her bag, it was surprisingly heavy, and led her to his wagon. The ride to the ranch was 20 miles of silence broken only by the creak of wheels and the sigh of the wind. Cora did not try to explain. She watched the barren landscape pass, her hands folded in her lap. When they finally reached the fence line of the Carter place, she spoke again. "You need a crop rotation," she said, matter-of-factly, just young to a patch of failed sorghum. "That soil is exhausted. Plant legumes there next year." Eli glanced at her, bewildered. She wasn't looking at him. She was studying his land with the critical eye of a surveyor. The cabin, when they reached it, was a stark testament to a man living alone. Cora stepped inside, set her bag down by the empty hearth, and surveyed the room. Without a word, she took off her bonnet, rolled up her sleeves, and filled a bucket from the pump. She began to scrub the table. Eli watched, paralyzed by her strange, efficient authority. "Who are you?" he finally asked. Cora paused, her hands in the wash water. "I am the help you paid for, Mr. Carter. My age does not affect my ability to work. You will find I am adept at accounting, animal husbandry, and basic mechanics. The photograph was a fiction. The agency is flexible with particulars." That night, Eli lay awake in his room, listening to the sounds of a stranger moving quietly in the kitchen below. He thought of the heavy bag, the locked clasp. He thought of her hands. They were not the soft hands of a widow who'd managed a household. They were marked, with faint scars and calluses in strange places. One scar, thin and white, traced the edge of her thumb like a knife slip. At dawn, he found her already in the barn, examining the hoof of his draft horse, Molly. She spoke to the animal in low, firm tones, and the horse, usually skittish, stood still. She noticed him. This one has a mild thrush, she said. I've cleaned it. You need to keep this stall dry. She stood, wiping her hands on her apron. I will prepare breakfast. There are eggs. Over the next week, a bizarre new routine took hold. Cora worked from first light to last. She repaired a broken harness. She reorganized his chaotic ledgers, finding a $20 billing error he'd missed. She identified a blight on the potato plot he hadn't even noticed. She was, as promised, immensely capable, but she was also a vault. She offered nothing of her past. She retired to the small room he'd given her immediately after supper, and he would hear the faint click of that lock on her carpet bag. The mystery of her festered alongside Eli's gratitude. He was actually catching up on sleep. The house was clean. For the first time in months, he had hope. Then, a week after her arrival, the first outside threat arrived. It came in the form of Sullers Grant, a widower who ranched to the north. Sullers rode over under the pretext of borrowing a whetstone. His real purpose was clear the moment he saw Cora hanging laundry. Heard you got yourself a helper, Eli, Sullers said, his tone oily. From back east, he eyed Cora openly. She met his gaze without blinking, then turned and went inside. Sullers chuckled. Got some spirit for an older model. The agency send you the wrong catalog. Eli felt a surge of protective anger that shocked him. She's my wife, he heard himself say, the lie coming out rough. We are married by proxy. It was the first story he could think of to explain her presence and shield her from gossip. Sullers' smirk faded, replaced by a look of genuine surprise. Well, congratulations. He left soon after, but the encounter left Eli shaken. He had just legally bound himself, in the eyes of the community, to a woman whose real name he didn't know. That evening, tension hung thick in the cabin. Cora served a stew she'd made from jackrabbit and the last of the winter carrots. Finally, she spoke. That was unwise, Mr. Carter. Lies of that magnitude have a way of circling back. What was I supposed to say? Eli snapped. That I was duped by a Chicago cheat and I'm too poor to send you back. You could have said nothing, she replied, her voice cool, but you did not. So now we are bound by your fiction. She studied him. You are not a foolish man. You must be wondering what is in the bag. Eli's breath caught. The question had been burning in him for days. Yes. It is not stolen goods, she said. It is not money. It is simply mine. And its contents are the reason I could not stay where I was. She stood, clearing the plates. That is all you need to know for your own safety. Her words were a door slammed shut, but they also confirmed his deepest suspicion. Cora was not just a victim of agency fraud, she was a fugitive. From what? The law? A husband? Something worse? Sleep was impossible that night. Near midnight he heard a sound from her room, not the click of the lock, but a soft, pained gasp. Then silence. The next morning she was pale but moved with her usual precision. She did not mention the night sound. But later, while she was in the garden, a powerful impulse seized Eli. He stood outside her closed bedroom door. The locked carpet bag sat at the foot of her neatly made bed, visible through the doorway. Every principle argued against it. But the fear of what a secret might drag onto his failing land, was louder. He crossed the threshold, knelt before the bag, and examined the lock. It was sturdy but simple. With a twist of a wire from the barn, he could. The floorboard behind him creaked. Eli froze, then turned. Cora stood in the hallway, holding a basket of weeds. She was not angry. She looked resigned and profoundly tired. I would not do that, Mr. Carter, she said softly. Some locks are better left unopened, for your sake. But the dam had broken in Eli. The stress, the uncertainty, the weight of his own dying dreams. Who are you running from? He demanded, rising to his feet. I have a right to know what danger you've brought to my door. Cora set the basket down. She walked into the room and stood between him and the bag. I am not running from a person, Eli, she said, using his given name for the first time. I am running from an institution, from the Sisters of Providence Hospital in St. Louis, and the bag does not contain a secret. She took a small key from a chain around her neck. It contains proof. She turned the key. The lock sprang open with a dull click. Inside the carpet bag there were no jewels, no gold coins. Instead, Eli saw neatly folded dresses, a small sewing kit, a Bible, and resting on top, a thick bundle of papers tied with string. Cora lifted the bundle out, its weight substantial in her hands. These are patient ledgers, she said, her voice low, mortality charts, supply invoices from the Sisters of Providence Hospital. I was the head nurse on the women's fever ward for 22 years. Eli stared, confused. You stole hospital records. Cupboard them, she corrected, every night for 3 months. These papers prove that the hospital administrator, a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, and the head of the board, a railroad magnate named Josiah Ware, have been systematically defrauding the city, the church, and the state. They invoice for medicine that is never delivered. They list patients who died as being discharged, collecting state care funds for ghosts. They have been selling bodies from the pauper's grave to medical colleges. My ward and my patients. They were the source. The room felt airless. Eli slowly sat on the edge of the bed. You're telling me you fled St. Louis because you uncovered corruption? Because I was about to testify before a state audit, Cora said, her eyes sharp. 2 days before the hearing, the hospital's boiler room, which was directly below my apartment in the nurses' quarters, exploded. It was deemed an accident, a tragic accident that killed one orderly and destroyed my rooms. All my personal copies of these documents were assumed burned. I was not. I was across town delivering a medication report. When I returned, Dr. Finch expressed such profound relief that I had survived. He insisted I move to a safer room. He was too kind, too eager. I knew then the explosion was meant for me and my evidence. So I took the originals I had hidden elsewhere, assumed the identity of a widow from the agency's files, and used the ticket you sent to disappear. Eli's mind raced, trying to reconcile the capable, quiet woman before him with a target of powerful, murderous men. Why not just go to the police, the newspapers? The police commissioner plays whist with Josiah Ware every Thursday, she said flatly. The newspaper that was going to run my story had its printing press vandalized the night before. These men do not just bribe, they own. I'm a nurse with a bag of papers. They are millionaires with private detectives. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency is on their payroll. The report you mentioned, it means they have traced the agency inquiry. They know the name Clara Mills came west to Nebraska. It is only a matter of time before they knock on your door. A cold dread settled in Eli's stomach. His simple dream of saving his ranch had just collided with a conspiracy that spanned states. He looked at the ledgers. The handwriting was precise, columns of dates, names, amounts. One entry circled in red read, Laudanum 12 hours invoiced, not received. Patient 347, J. Miller, deceased 11/3/84. The sheer, mundane evil of it was staggering. What do you intend to do with these? He asked. Publish them, she said, but not here. I need to get to San Francisco. There is a newspaper editor there, a man named Sterling who has no ties to Ware's railroad empire. He will print the truth, but I need time and I need a place to stay hidden while I arrange passage. Your ranch, it is isolated. You told your neighbor we are married. That provides a public cover. I am asking for sanctuary, Mr. Carter, a few more weeks. Eli stood and walked to the window, looking out at his parched land. Sanctuary. The word felt biblical and heavy. By harboring her, he would become an accomplice. He could lose everything, the ranch, his freedom, but sending her away now felt like handing her over to be silenced. He thought of the explosion, meant to look like an accident. He turned back to her. You work for your keep. And if anyone comes asking, you're my wife, Cora Carter, we stick to that story. A flicker of something, relief, gratitude, passed over her stern features. Thank you. The next days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Every rider on the horizon made Eli tense. Cora, however, seemed to channel her anxiety into work with furious intensity. She devised a system to collect morning dew from sheets of canvas to water the struggling vegetable garden. She identified a patch of wild turnips he'd overlooked. She began treating Molly's thrush with a poultice made from witch hazel. Her medical knowledge was undeniable, but now Eli saw the cost of it in the shadows under her eyes. One afternoon, while mending a fence together, Eli ventured a question. The patient who died, J. Miller, did you know her? Cora's hands stilled on the wire. Jane Miller, she said softly. She was 19, a seamstress. She had typhoid. She needed that laudanum for the pain. She died clutching my hand, screaming for it to stop. The invoice for her medicine was submitted a week after her burial. They profited from her agony twice. That is what is in that bag, Eli, not just numbers, the echoes of screams. Eli had no words. He simply handed her another fence staple. The fragile piece shattered a week later. Eli rode into Cunner for salt and ammunition. At the general store, the postmaster handed him a letter. It was not addressed to him. It was addressed to Mrs. Clara Mills, General Delivery, Cunner, Nebraska. The return address was a law office in St. Louis. Eli's blood ran cold. He tucked the letter into his coat, his purchases forgotten. Back at the ranch, he wordlessly handed the envelope to Cora. Her face paled. She slit it open with a kitchen knife. Her eyes scanned the single, typed page, then she let it fall to the table. "It is from a lawyer representing the estate of the late Dr. Alistair Finch," she said, her voice hollow. "Late?" Eli asked. "He died," she read aloud, 2 weeks ago. "A tragic carriage accident. The letter states that as a former employee in good standing, I may be entitled to a small pension from the hospital's benevolence fund. To claim it, I must present myself in St. Louis with identification. It is a trap. They are flushing the brush. They know I am here or nearby. They are offering bait." Eli picked up the letter. The wording was formal, generous. It felt like a spider's web woven of silk. "So they know you're using the name Clara Mills, but they don't know about Cora Carter." "Not yet," she whispered, "but Sullers Grant saw me. He heard you call me your wife. If a Pinkerton detective starts asking in Cunner about a woman matching my description, Sullers will talk. For a few dollars, he will talk at length." Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in Eli. "We need to move you. Now." "Where?" Cora asked, a rare hint of desperation in her voice. "I have no money for a ticket west. You have no money to give me." Before Eli could answer, the sound of a wagon approached. Not the familiar groan of a neighbor's cart, but the crisp roll of well-greased axles. They both rushed to the window. A black buggy, polished to a shine, pulled up to the gate. A man in a dark suit and derby hat climbed out, followed by a larger, broader man who moved with the deliberate grace of a fighter. The Pinkertons. They had not gone to town first. They had come straight to the source. Eli's mind seized. "Hide the bag. Now, go out the back, run for the creek bed." Cora shook her head, her expression settling into a grim resolve. "Running now will only confirm guilt, and they will hunt you instead. We hold to the story. We are Eli and Cora Carter, married." She swiftly relocked the carpet bag and shoved it under the bed, then smoothed her apron. Her face became a mask of placid, elderly dignity. A knock came at the door, firm and authoritative. Eli took a deep breath, trying to still the pounding in his chest, and opened it. The man in the suit tuppered his hat. "Good afternoon, Mr. Eli Carter. I am Mr. Olbrut. This is my associate, Mr. Pike. We are making inquiries on behalf of a client in St. Louis regarding a missing person. May we come in?" Eli stepped back, his throat tight. "Of course." The two men entered, their eyes sweeping the small cabin with professional detachment. Pike, the large one, stood near the door, his presence blocking the exit. Olbrut's gaze landed on Cora, who was now quietly kneading bread dough at the table. "And you must be Mrs. Carter," Olbrut said, smiling. "A pleasure." Cora offered a slight, polite nod. "Gentlemen, would you care for coffee? It is not fresh." "No thank you, ma'am. We won't take much of your time." Olbrut removed a photograph from his inside pocket. It was the same sepia image Eli had been sent, the picture of the false Clara Mills. "Have either of you seen this woman? She may have passed through the area. We have reason to believe she may be using the name Clara Mills." Eli took the photo, making a show of studying it. He shook his head. "Can't say I have. She doesn't look familiar. Cora, dear." Cora glanced over. "No, sir, I'm afraid not. Is she in some sort of trouble?" "Our client is her concerned uncle," Olbrut said smoothly, retrieving the photo. "She suffers from fits of melancholy. He fears for her safety and wishes to bring her home. There is a generous reward for information leading to her whereabouts." He let the word reward hang in the air, watching their faces. Eli kept his expression neutral. "Well, if we see anyone fitting that description, we'll certainly let the sheriff know." Olbrut's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course." He took a slow step further into the room, his gaze drifting. "You have a lovely, quiet place here, very remote. Must be lonely for a woman used to city life, Mrs. Carter. Where did you say you were from?" I didn't, Cora said, her hands continuing to work the dough. But I was raised in Iowa, Davenport, quite a bustling place compared to this. Iowa, Ulbrut repeated. He walked casually toward the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Pike shifted his weight. You wouldn't mind if we took a quick look around the outbuildings? Sometimes runaways hide in barns, you understand. Standard procedure. Eli's heart hammered against his ribs. The bag was under the bed in that room. If they insisted on searching the cabin, he forced a shrug. Be my guest. The barn's a mess, though. As Ulbrut's hand reached for the bedroom doorknob, Cora suddenly cried out, dropping the dough and clutching her chest. She staggered, gasping for breath. Eli, the medicine, my heart. Eli was at her side in an instant, supporting her as she sagu. The performance was terrifyingly convincing. Her lips were blanched, her breath coming in short, wheezing rasps. Ulbrut paused, his hand retreating from the door, his face a mask of annoyed concern. Is she ill? A chronic condition, sir, Eli said, his voice thick with feigned worry. The excitement, it's too much. I need to get her tonic. It's in the bedroom. He shot a look at the detectives. Please, gentlemen, the barn is out back. Help yourselves. The moment was broken. Ulbrut studied Cora's ashen face for a long second, then tuppered his hat again. We would not wish to cause distress. We can see the barn from the outside. Come, Pike. The two men turned and left, closing the front door behind them. Eli and Cora remained frozen until they heard the buggy wheels begin to roll away. Cora's breathing slowly evened. She stood up straight, the culk returning to her face. They will be back, she said, her voice steady once more. That man, Ulbrut, he was looking at the floor by the bed. He saw the edge of the carpet bag. He knows. How can you be sure? Because a man like that, she said, is paid to notice what does not belong. A locked carpet bag under a poor rancher's bed is a curiosity, and curiosities are what he is here to investigate. They will not go far. They will wait, and they will watch. Eli felt a surge of hopeless anger. Then we are trapped. We can't run, we can't stay. We can fight, Cora said, her eyes glinting with a ferocity he had not seen before. But not with guns, with their own weapon, information. You said you needed to save this ranch. What if I told you the proof in that bag doesn't just expose murder and fraud? It contains a map to something they want even more than my silence. It shows where Josiah Ware buried his real fortune, not in a bank, in the ground, and I know where. Eli stared at her, the air knocked from his lungs. The buried fortune of Josiah Ware, the railroad magnate, here in Nebraska. Not here, Cora said, moving swiftly to the window to watch the retreating buggy. But close. The ledgers don't just track fraud, they track shipments. Ware used the hospital as a front to move assets he didn't want on the books. Gold from a mine dispute in Colorado, bonds from a bankrupted rival. In 1883, a shipment valued at over $300,000 vanished from the records. The invoice called it surgical steel. The destination was a plot of land he owned outside a town called Broken Wheel, just over the border in the Dakota Territory. The land was purchased through a shell company, but the deed is in the bag. I believe he buried it there, a private reserve, untraceable. $300,000. The number was so vast it was meaningless to Eli, whose entire world was measured in dollars and cents. That's a king's ransom. It's his escape fund, Cora said, turning back to him, her eyes alight with a strategic fire. He's a thief among thieves. He doesn't trust banks and he certainly doesn't trust his partners. If his empire ever crumbled, that cash was his ticket to a new life abroad. Now his empire is Österos crumbling because of my testimony. He wants me dead to stop the audit, but he needs that map to secure his own future. The Pinkertons aren't just here for me, they're here for the deed. The pieces slammed together in Eli's mind with terrifying clarity. The two men in the buggy weren't just hired guns, they were treasure hunters, and they were sitting 200 yards down the dirt road, not leaving, watching, waiting for cover of darkness, for the old woman to have another heart spell, for the rancher to leave. They would come back and they would not knock. We have to get the bag out of the house, Eli said, his voice tight. Now. Where? They're watching the only road. The old root cellar, Eli said. The entrance is hidden under the woodpile behind the barn. They haven't searched there yet. It's the last place they'd look for a fortune in paper. They moved with a frantic, silent efficiency. Eli carried the heavy bag. Cora followed, scattering their footsteps with a broom. He moved the split logs, revealing a rusted metal door set into the ground. The cool, damp air of the cellar wafted up. He placed the bag inside, behind a barrel of long-spoiled potatoes. As he replaced the woodpile, he saw the black buggy, a dark speck in the distance, stationary. "They're making camp," Cora observed from the barn's shadow. "They have the patience of vultures. We must be the foxes." Back in the cabin, they formulated a plan over a pot of bitter coffee. The objective was no longer just survival. It was offensive. "We use the map as bait," Cora said. "We let them think they've found it, but we lead them to a false location. While they are digging in the Dakota Badlands, I get on a train to San Francisco with the real documents." "And how do we do that?" Eli asked. "They're watching us like hawks." "We give them a show," Cora said. "A falling out. You, the greedy rancher, discover your old mail-order bride has a map to a fortune. You want it for yourself. We stage a loud argument. You throw me out. I, in a panic, run to what they will believe is my hiding place, the root cellar, to retrieve my treasure. They will follow me. They will see me take something from the cellar. I will then flee toward the train station, leading them on a chase. You will be here, the angry, duped husband, giving them no reason to suspect we are working together." Eli's mind raced through the plan. It was audacious. It put her directly in their crosshairs. What stops them from just grabbing you the moment you're alone on the road? "Because I won't be alone," Cora said. "You will have already ridden to Sheriff Buller in the next county. You will tell him a wild story about Pinkerton agents harassing your wife, that you fear for her life. You will bring him back at dawn officially. Their license to operate relies on a veneer of legality. They will not kidnap or kill a woman with a county sheriff as a witness. They will follow, hoping I lead them to the prize. And I will, to an empty field 50 miles from here." The complexity was dizzying, but it was the only play on the board. They spent the next hour crafting the details, their voices low. The argument had to be convincing. Eli would accuse her of deceit, of using him. He would demand to see what was in the bag. She would refuse. He would storm out, ostensibly to get drunk in town, but instead ride hard for the next county. As dusk settled, they put the first act into motion. Eli's voice roared through the thin cabin walls, a performance fueled by genuine fear. "You lied to me. You've brought nothing but trouble. I want to see what's in that damn bag." Cora's voice, shrill with defiance, replied, "It is mine. You have no right. I should never have come to this wretched place." The sound of a chair overturning, a plate shattering. From a distance, it would look utterly real. Eli stomped out of the cabin, slammed the door, and mounted his horse, riding not toward town, but cutting across the back pasture, disappearing into the gathering dark. Alone, Cora waited. She moved to the window, her heart a drum against her ribs. She saw a flicker of movement near the distant buggy. One of the men was moving on foot, coming closer. It was time. She threw a shawl over her shoulders and, with a visible tremor in her hands, took a lantern from the hook. She lit it and hurried out the back door, casting fearful glances over her shoulder. She made a beeline for the barn, then, seemingly changing her mind, darted toward the woodpile. She made a show of struggling to move a log, then slipped down into the root cellar. Inside, in the lantern's glow, she did not touch her bag. Instead, she took a pre-prepared bundle from a shelf, a roll of blank paper tied with string, weighted with a rock to feel substantial. She clutched it to her chest, scrambled back out, and replaced the log. Then she ran. She did not head for the road. She cut across the open field toward a line of cottonwoods that marked a dry creek bed, the lantern bobbing like a drunken star. As she ran, she heard the soft crunch of boots on dry grass behind her. They were following. Her plan was to reach the old Miller homestead, a burned-out shell 5 miles east, where she had hidden a farmer's wagon and a placid old mare earlier in the week, a contingency she had prepared without telling Eli. From there, she would drive to the false coordinates, plant the fake map, and loop back toward the railway. But the Pinkertons were professionals. As Cora reached the creek bed, a figure materialized from the shadows in front of her. It was Pike, the larger detective. He stood, blocking her path, his face impassive in the moonlight. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Carter, or should I call you Nurse Cora?" Cora stopped, her breath clouding in the cold air. She clutched the fake bundle tighter. let me pass." Olbrut's smooth voice came from behind her. "I'm afraid we must insist on seeing what you've retrieved. A trade, the bundle for your safe passage. No one needs to get hurt." Cora's mind worked furiously. They were supposed to follow, not intercept. This was a more aggressive play. She calculated the distance to the hidden wagon, too far. She turned to face Olbrut, who was now just 10 feet away. "This is private property. You are trespassing." "We are conducting a lawful investigation," Olbrut said, taking a step closer. His eyes were fixed on the bundle. "Now hand it over." "Or what?" Cora challenged, her voice steady. "You'll murder me here and explain it to the sheriff my husband is fetching." Olbrut's smile was thin. Who said anything about murder? Accidents happen, especially to elderly women wandering alone at night, far from help. It was then that Cora realized their true directive: recover the map by any means necessary and leave no witnesses who could connect it to where. Her testimony was a threat, but the map was the real objective. She had miscalculated their ruthlessness. She took a step back, her heels slipping on the creek bank. Pike took a step forward. In that moment, a shot rang out, cracking the night air, not aimed at anyone, but into the sky. From the ridge above the creek, Eli Carter stood silhouetted against the moon, his rifle raised. The next shot kicked up dirt at Pike's feet. The big man flinched. "Let her go," Eli shouted, his voice echoing. "The next one finds a home." Olbrut's composure broke into a snarl. He drew a revolver from his coat. "This is not your concern, rancher." "He's my wife," Eli roared and fired again. This bullet grazed Olbrut's sleeve. The detective fired back, the report deafening. Cora dropped to the ground, the fake bundle falling. In the confusion, Eli scrambled down the bank, firing twice more to cover his approach. He grabbed Cora's arm, yanking her up. "Run." They fled down the creek bed, bullets whistling overhead. The Pinkertons gave chase, but the rugged terrain and darkness favored the locals. Eli led Cora to a cut in the bank he knew from boyhood, a hidden animal trail that wound up to the bluffs. They lost their pursuers in the labyrinth of sandstone and scrub. An hour later, breathless and bleeding from scrapes, they crouched in a shallow cave. The sound of the buggy's wheels faded in the distance, the detectives retreating to regroup. The plan was in ashes. They were now known to be working together, and they were both targets. Eli checked his rifle, 2 bullets left. They'll be back at first light, with reinforcements or the local law in their pocket. Cora was silent for a long moment, shivering not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. Then she spoke, her voice hollow with a new realization. "I was wrong, Eli. The fortune, it isn't in Dakota." "What?" "The deed in the bag," she whispered. "I reviewed it again last night. The land description, it uses a surveying marker that was changed in 1879. The new surveys place the plot not in Dakota, but in western Nebraska, on land that was bought by the railroad and then sold to a homesteader a year later." Eli felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night. What homesteader? Cora looked at him, her eyes wide with dreadful certainty. The name on the homestead grant was Elias Carter, your father. "Eli, the fortune isn't buried on some distant plot. Just so we're buried $300,000 in gold and bonds somewhere on your ranch." The words hung in the cold air of the cave. Eli could only stare, his mind reeling through a lifetime of memories on that land. His father, a silent, bitter man who had died when Eli was 16, had often muttered about fool, gold, and cursed earth. He pointed to a specific corner of the north pasture, a jagged outcrop of sandstone, and told Eli to never dig there. "Some things are buried for a reason, boy," he'd said. He bought the land from the railroad, Cora pressed, urgency cutting through his shock. "In late 1878, for a fraction of its value. Why would a railroad magnate sell prime land cheap to a dirt-poor homesteader unless he needed a custodian, a silent partner who didn't know he was guarding a vault?" Eli's thoughts spun. His father's sudden, unexplained trip to Omaha the next spring, the new plow and livestock that appeared, debts mysteriously paid. His father's later descent into drink and paranoia, shooting at shadows in the night. He wasn't guarding a vault, he was haunted by it, and now that ghost had come for his son. First light was a smear of grey on the horizon. They had maybe an hour. The plan was in tatters, but the board had changed. The treasure was here, on their ground. That was an advantage. We can't outrun them anymore, Eli said, his voice hardening with a new resolve. So we use it. We turn their greed against them right here. How? Cora asked. We give them what they want, Eli said. We let them dig it up. Cora stared at him, uncomprehending. Listen, he said, his mind racing ahead. They want the fortune. You have the deed that proves where it is. We make a trade. The deed for our lives and a guarantee of safe passage for you to testify. We meet them at the outcrop. We show them the deed. We tell them to dig. While they're distracted, overwhelmed by the gold, we slip away. You head west with the real evidence, the fraud ledgers. I'll head east and find that newspaper editor you mentioned. They'll just kill us the moment they have the location, Cora said. Not if the whole county is watching, Eli replied, a grim smile touching his lips. You said their power relies on a veneer of legality, so we don't meet in secret. We send a message to Sullers Grant, to the preacher, to every busybody within 10 miles. We tell them Pinkerton detectives are here to seize Elias Carter's land over a disputed deed. We make it a public spectacle, a land dispute. Men will come to watch that. They'll bring rifles. Olbrat won't risk a massacre. He'll have to play the part of the reasonable agent. It was a desperate, brilliant gamble. It leveraged the very isolation they feared. In a remote community, a land grab was a call to arms. Cora nodded slowly, seeing the logic. We need the deed from the seller. They moved like ghosts through the pre-dawn gloom. Returning to the ranch was a terrifying risk, but the buggy was gone. The Pinkertons had likely pulled back to plan their next assault. Eli fetched the bag from the root cellar. In the cabin's faint light, Cora untied the bundle and carefully extracted a single, crisp sheet of paper, the land deed. The rest of the ledgers she rewrapped. This stays with me, she said, no matter what happens. Eli then saddled his fustest horse. He wrote 3 crude notes, Pinkertons trying to steal Carter land, North Pasture, Sunrise. He rode a frantic circuit, slipping notes under doors, tossing one into the open window of the saloon in Cunner. By the time he returned, a pale sun was breaching the horizon, and a curious, wary crowd was already gathering on the ridge overlooking the North Pasture. Men with rifles stood beside their wagons. Sullers Grant was there, his face alight with avid curiosity. At the center of the pasture, near the sandstone outcrop, Cora stood alone, the deed in her hand. The black buggy rolled up minutes later. Olbrat and Pike stepped out, their expressions darkening as they saw the crowd of 30-odd witnesses. Olbrat tuppered his hat to the crowd, his smile strained. Good morning. This is a private business matter. Eli stepped forward, his voice carrying, this is my land. These men are trying to take it with a fraudulent deed. We are here to settle it, publicly. Olbrat's eyes flickered to Cora, to the paper in her hand. He understood the game immediately. Very well, he said, his voice tight. Let's see this deed. Cora held it up. It describes a parcel within this homestead, purchased by Josiah Ware. It states that any mineral or hidden assets found thereon belong to the deed holder. Is that correct, Mr. Olbrat? It is, Olbrat said, playing along for the audience. Then, according to this, Cora said loudly, if assets are found today, they belong to your client. And in exchange, you will drop all other inquiries and provide written guarantees of safe passage for me and Mr. Carter. Do you agree? The crowd murmured. Olbrat was trapped. To refuse would seem dishonest. To agree would mean committing in front of armed witnesses. He gave a curt nod. We agree. Now where is the asset? Cora walked to the base of the sandstone outcrop. She pointed to a specific fissure described in the deed's meticulous text. Here. Pike, with a crowbar produced from the buggy, began to pry at the rock. The crowd pressed closer, a collective breath held. The work was hard, the rock stubborn. After 20 minutes, Pike's bar hit something hollow. A wooden crate, tarred against the damp, was buried 4 feet down. With a heave, he and Olbrat dragged it from the earth. The crate was small but immensely heavy. Olbrat used the crowbar to pry off the lid. The morning sun glinted dully on the contents, not the gleaming gold coins of adventure tailies, but dense, packed rows of gold ingots, each stamped with a smelter's mark. Beside them, All cloth packages contained bundles of bonds and stock certificates. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Sullers Grant's eyes were wide as dinner plates. Olbrat knelt, running a hand over the ingots, a look of triumph breaking through his professional mask. He had it, the fortune, the proof of Ware's secret wealth. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. The agreement is satisfied, he announced to the crowd. The assets are recovered. There is no further dispute. He turned to Cora, his voice low enough that only she and Eli could hear. You have your passage. Be on the westbound train tomorrow. If you ever speak of this, or of St. Louis, we will know, and the next explosion will not miss. He and Pike loaded the crate into the buggy. The crowd, buzzing with the thrill of witnessed treasure, began to disperse, already spinning the tale. Eli and Cora were left alone in the torn-up earth. They walked back to the cabin in silence. The weight of the confrontation was followed by a crushing emptiness. They had won their survival, but the ranch was still dying. The debt remained. Eli had traded a fortune he never knew he had for his life. Inside, Cora prepared to leave. She packed her few things, the bag of ledgers now her only possession. Eli watched, a hollow feeling in his chest. You'll take the train tomorrow? He asked. I must, she said. The editor in San Francisco is expecting a package. This story must be printed. It's the only thing that can truly stop Ware. Eli nodded. He poured 2 cups of cold coffee. I guess this is goodbye then. Cora looked at him, her shrewd expression softening. You saved my life, Eli Carter, more than once. You could have taken that deed and dug up the gold yourself. You could have sold me to them. It was your proof, Eli said, and it felt wrong. That gold was bought with the suffering of your patients. It's cursed, like my father said. I don't want it. Cora was silent for a long moment. Then she did something surprising. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. It was a copy, a duplicate deed. I made 2, she said quietly. The one they have is perfect. But this one has a slight variation in the land description. A clerical error, one might say. It references a survey marker that was, in fact, 10 feet to the west of where they dug. Eli took the paper, confused. What are you saying? They were in a hurry, Cora said, a faint, sharp smile on her lips. They saw the gold. They stopped looking. But the main cache, Eli, the bonds, the ingots, that was the decoy. Ware was too clever to bury it all in one spot. The deed they have leads to a fraction of the wealth. The real fortune, the bulk of it, another 200,000 in raw gold ore and railroad stock, is buried 10 feet to the west, under that flat limestone slab you used to picnic on as a boy. Eli felt the world tilt. He remembered the slab. He'd eaten his lunch there 1,000 times. He stared at the duplicate deed, then at Cora's calm, knowing face. You knew all along. I suspected, she said. The ledger entries hinted at 2 shipments. I only confirmed it when I compared the original survey maps last night. I needed to see what they would do. If they had been unarubed men, they would have taken the decoy and left us be. Their greed made them blind. The real fortune is still yours, Eli. It always was. The shock gave way to a flood of impossible relief. The debt, the drought, the fear, it could all be over. But as he looked at Cora, a new thought struck him. You're leaving tomorrow. You could have taken this second deed. You could have that fortune for yourself. Cora shook her head. I am a nurse, not a treasure hunter. My fortune is justice. And perhaps, she hesitated, an uncharacteristic vulnerability in her eyes, perhaps a friend. You gave me sanctuary when you had every reason to throw me out. This is your land, your legacy, it should be yours. The next morning, they stood on the platform at Cunner Station. The westbound train hissed and smoked. Cora wore a new, simple dress bought with the last of Eli's cash. The bag of ledgers was at her feet. The story felt both complete and utterly unfinished. You'll send word when the story runs, Eli asked. I will, she said, and you will dig up your future. In time, he said, carefully. He looked at her, this formidable, mysterious woman who had upended his life. What will you do after San Francisco? Cora looked at the distant horizon. There are always hospitals that need nurses, and always corrupt men who need watching. She offered her hand. It was a formal gesture, but her grip was firm. Thank you, Eli. He took her hand, then on an impulse pulled her into a brief, awkward hug. She stiffened, then relaxed, patting his back once. "Take care of that ranch," she murmured. She boarded the train. Eli stood on the platform as it pulled away, a shrinking speck of smoke and steam against the vast prairie. He returned to a ranch that was no longer dying, but sleeping, waiting for its rightful wealth to be awakened. 2 months later, a newspaper arrived from San Francisco. The front page of Asterisk Sentinel bore the headline, "Hospital of HOROS, How a Railroad Magnate and a Doctor Defrauded a City and Sold the Dead." The story, backed by devastating ledgers, sparked outrage and a federal investigation. Josiah Ware was arrested on multiple charges. The Pinkerton agency, implicated in the cover-up, faced severe scrutiny. Enclosed with the newspaper was a short, unsigned letter. "The garden is growing well here. I have taken a position at a new hospital. They are planting legumes. See." Eli smiled. He folded the letter and placed it in the Bible on his mantle. Outside, the first good rain in 3 years was falling, soaking into the thirsty earth. He walked to the north pasture, to the limestone slab. He did not dig, not yet. The fortune was safe. For now, the rain was treasure enough. He fixed the roof. He paid the bank. He bought a new breed of drought-resistant cattle. The Carter Ranch slowly, steadily came back to life. The legend of the shootout and the recovered treasure became local folklore, the details softening with each telling. Eli never corrected them. He married 2 years later to a schoolteacher from Cunner. He never told her about the gold under the slab or the fierce, gray-haired nurse who had passed through his life like a prairie storm. On the day his first son was born, Eli finally went to the slab with a shovel. He unearthed the second crate. It was all there, just as Cora had said. He took only what he needed to secure his family's future, then reburied the rest. A legacy not for spending, but for keeping. A secret held in the earth like a seed. Years later, an aging Eli Carter received a final letter, postmarked from a hospital in Portland. It contained a pressed sunflower and 2 lines. "The beans are thriving. You were the only one who never asked me to be anything else. Cora." He never heard from her again. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would walk to the north pasture and sit on the limestone slab, now warm from the sun, and look out at the land that had almost been lost, then saved twice over, first by a stranger's courage and then by her silence. The story of Eli Carter and Cora Mills is a fiction, but it is woven from 1,000 true threads of the American frontier. In the vast, lonely stretches of the West, where men outnumbered women 2 to 1 in places like Montana, the mail-order bride system was a desperate, practical solution. It was a business, advertised in newspapers back east, promising companionship and stability, but it was a business riddled with risk. For every lasting union built on candid letters, there were tales of deception, of photographs that did not match the person who stepped off the train, of hearts broken and hopes dashed upon the hard reality of a stranger's land. The real treasure hidden in these stories was not gold, but truth. The frontier was a place of reinvention, where people could shed their pasts and carry their secrets in locked carpet bags. A woman might be running from a failed farm, a bad marriage, or a crime. A man might be hiding from debt, from the law, or from his own failures. They met on train platforms, these strangers, and decided in a glance whether to build a life or walk away. The historical record shows that many chose to build, forging partnerships that weathered drought, disease, and isolation. They learned that trust, once earned, was a currency more valuable than any hidden fortune. Eli and Cora's tale echoes that deeper truth. It wasn't the gold under the limestone slab that saved the Carter Ranch. It was the unexpected alliance between 2 solitary people, one who had lost all hope, and one who had nothing left to lose but her truth. They found in each other an unlikely partner, a witness to their own hidden strength. In a world that saw a barren widow and a failing rancher, they saw a strategist and a protector. They chose to fight for each other, and in doing so, they saved themselves. That is the legacy of countless untold stories from that era. It's not just about the brides who were 17 or 22 or even 62. It's about the human capacity for resilience and the profound courage it takes to offer sanctuary to a stranger. The frontier was not won by lone heroes, but by fragile, fierce agreements made between people who dared to believe a new life was possible. So the next time you see an old, weathered farmhouse standing alone on the plains, remember that the land holds more than crops or cattle. It holds the echoes of private pacts, of secrets kept and burdens shared, of quiet partnerships that turn dry ground into a home. The real history is written not in the deeds, but in the choices people made when no one was watching. If you found this story of hidden fortunes and unexpected redemption compelling, there are countless more tales from the forgotten corners of history waiting to be told. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. Until then, thank you for listening.